Hello everyone! It has been quite a while, 2 weeks to be precise, since we last saw each other. And we left off on a rather emotionally taxing episode. And this one, honestly, I don't know if it's too much better. So, without wasting a moment more, let us dive right into this week's episode of Critical Role. So, Not did in fact bring with her the knife that was used to open up the door that led into the chambers of the sarcophagus that held the Laughing Hand. And it was discovered that this dagger has the magical properties of sealing doorways, almost indefinitely. A rather handy tool to have. In the beginning of this episode, the party was really talking about what they should do next. They didn't quite touch on the events that had just transpired. They were more concerned about what actions they need to take to move forward. The Mighty Nein was pretty split on what they wanted to do. Some of them wanted to contact the Bright Queen. Others wanted to cut their losses and just run. Run where? Clay and Ford have showed interest in the kiln to the northwest, where they believe they might find answers to defeating the Laughing Hand. Not expressed the desire to reunite herself with Yasha and Luke, possibly in Nicodranus. Jester also expressing her desire to visit her mother, make sure everything's alright. Bo wasn't quite sure which direction they should go, but as the conversation progressed into contacting the Bright Queen, and eventually doing so, the Bright Queen essentially saying, "Keep quiet and come talk to me, we'll discuss the details further." Bo was under the strong opinion of sharing their information with the people in Bazzoxan in an effort to save lives. But before we go into that, I thought it was quite hilarious to an extent how there was so much tension brewing over contacting the Bright Queen. They were worried about her being angry or disappointed, and while she may be disappointed and just didn't show it, she was still very positive in what she was saying and simply requested that the Mighty Nein come speak with her more. So all of this anxiety for a relatively decent outcome. But the idea that the Bright Queen wanted the party to keep quiet about the Laughing Hand, it makes sense because it would probably instill a state of hysteria on Bazzoxan and any other cities that the Mighty Nein might warn. But it did spark a debate within the Mighty Nein, Ford saying that he would rather just lie to the Queen, Bo saying that she believes that the party should warn everyone of this potential threat, but then Clay saying that honesty is the best policy. And then the other debate was even going to the Queen in the first place. They had already sent the message, now it was either, alright, let's run north, or go back to the Queen and report in. Ford was very against reporting back to the Queen, but Clay, being the persuasive Furbolg that he is, was able to convince the party otherwise, and that the best course of action is to tell the Queen everything they know. But before they left, the party decided to take things into their own hands and subtly warn the people of Bazzoxan of the threat that was to come. They were successful to certain extents, but what they quickly found out was that the Queen did warn the people of Bazzoxan that there was a threat coming. She just wasn't specific on what it was. So again, another funny moment where there's this whole debate and conflict brewing within the party of, do we warn people or do we obey the Bright Queen's orders? And in the end, the Bright Queen had already warned the people of Bazzoxan that something was coming. But now let's talk about each party member individually. You know, how they're sort of feeling, what they're sort of going through after the events of the previous episode. Both Ford and Jester seemed a bit on edge and a little testy. They were more quick-tempered than we've usually seen them. Ford cutting Jester off in a conversation so he could finish his thought on the topic. Jester saying she doesn't care and showing no concern that Not was continuing to drink. Clay was very focused on trying to make sure the party remained focused and together, trying to make them feel better about themselves, that they did nothing wrong, this was out of their hands. They should be proud of what they did. They did their best to prevent what happened, and failing to stop it really isn't their fault. It was going to happen either way. They just happened to be there when it happened. And then Bo was trying to think logically and tactically about the whole situation, trying to think of what the best course of action is. Caleb was also sort of in the ballpark of how Bo and Clay were, trying to make sure everyone remained focused and trying to think of the most logical action to take next. Obviously, the party is feeling very overwhelmed at the moment, so it's just interesting to stop and take a look at how each of them deals with it. Things slowly became more and more tense and depressing as the conversations went on, especially when Jester decided to scry on Yasha. During this scry, it was discovered that Oban has returned, and Yasha and Oban are now going to try to find the other champions of the Crawling King / possibly the Angel of Irons. Now, probably the most heartbreaking part about this episode was then after the scry ended, and Jester immediately broke down into tears, crying out, asking if Yasha was bad the whole time. Now, this was pretty difficult to watch because everyone was thinking the same thing. Jester was just the first one to really say it out loud with such emotion. So while she was asking if she was bad the whole time, everyone just didn't know what to say at first. It just quickly turned into a very heart-wrenching moment. And what makes things even more depressing is that Bo was saying that that wasn't Yasha anymore, and they should stop calling her Yasha. She's now the orphan maker again. Caleb expressed concern that Yasha's betrayal is what could be enough to sever the party and make them go their separate ways, or make it so the party could never really be whole again. And so Caleb desperately wants to try to make sure the party stays together, especially now. But then after the group conversation, Jester and Bo had sort of a side conversation, still on the topic of Yasha and what the party plans on doing. Jester was saying how she keeps messing up, how she doesn't really believe in herself anymore, how she doesn't want to let the others in the party down, she wants to impress them. Now, these weren't her exact words, but what she was saying implied such. It's clear that she's losing confidence. The loss of Yasha has definitely taken its toll on Jester in particular. And Bo said it did take a toll on her as well, and we could see that Bo was trying to open up to Jester, but the words just weren't coming out. There was hesitation when she was about to start sentences, but then she just broke off and didn't say anything. It was rather frustrating because we know that Bo puts up these walls and she doesn't want to appear weak, and so she decided to not fully express her feelings towards the loss of Yasha. Bo quickly turned the conversation back towards Jester and did her best to uplift her spirit and give her the confidence that she needed. Bo basically saying that Jester does do good. Maybe not as good as Clay, as she also said, but still good. After their conversation, Caleb came in to have a quick conversation with Bo, where Caleb said that Bo also does some good. And then what's really interesting is that immediately after Caleb said this, Bo opens up to Caleb and starts talking about the things the party has done, the loss of Yasha, and all of her sort of internal thoughts that she was having in the moment. So it's interesting that she was easily able to open up to Caleb, but she's still struggling to open up with Jester. And now, moving on with the episode, Jester finally had a conversation with the Traveler that evening in Bazzoxan. They talked about the convention that the Traveler wants to have, uniting many of the followers of himself. Jester suggested holding the convention in a volcano, specifically the kiln where the party is likely headed towards. The Traveler seemed amused by this idea, and, well, it's probably going to happen in the volcano. Hey, I'm not going to complain. But this convention feels so vague. I can't help but feel a bit uneasy about the whole thing. The Traveler also made mention that there are many eyes watching the party, these eyes being the other gods, and he specifically said that the Storm Lord is keeping a close eye on Yasha. So, there is still hope for our beloved barbarian. Hopefully the Storm Lord can help in pulling her out of whatever darkness she's trapped in. And now we're going to be jumping a bit later into the episode. The party did end up returning to Rosohna to meet with the Bright Queen. Another intense moment as the party was unsure of what the Bright Queen was going to say in regards to their failure But ultimately, the conversation went positively. The Queen had said that because the Mighty Nein had given her the information about the attack on the garrison and the Scourgers attempting assassinations, they were able to limit and almost completely nullify any casualties. And she also mentioned that they captured one of these Scourger assassins. Now, obviously, this piqued the interest of Caleb because he was training to become a Scourger back in his time with the Empire. Before the meeting was over, Caleb requested an audience with this Scourger assassin. And now this is when my heart personally started racing because of the thought that it might be Astrid or someone else he knew from his past. Especially when the Bright Queen said it was a female assassin. This assassin was scheduled to be executed, so Caleb wanted to have an audience with this person as soon as possible. So after the meeting, they were led to the dungeons where Caleb had a one-on-one with this assassin. It was an extremely intense moment, not knowing if this was Astrid or not, and Caleb not wanting this assassin to know who he was. However, it was soon discovered that this assassin was not Astrid, but the assassin was able to figure out that Caleb was indeed Bren. The assassin mentioned that she had heard much about Bren, and she found it interesting how he was fighting for the other side now. And Caleb sort of came back with asking the assassin how it feels to be fed lies, but all the assassin did was smile back at him. Now this obviously shook Caleb down to his very core. He was faced with what he could have become if he never left the Empire. But that's not what worries me. What worries me is that before this assassin knew of Bren's whereabouts, she was fully accepting the fact that she was going to be executed and killed. She had no purpose. She had no mission anymore. But now that she knows that Bren is alive and knows where he is and knows what side he's fighting for, she now has a mission. She now has a reason to continue on and attempt to escape. I believe that this Scourger is going to find a way to make an exit before her execution and share her information with Trent. Now, after Caleb's encounter with this assassin, he decided to go off on his own and sort of collect his thoughts. He was very shaken over the encounter. The rest of their party made their way back to the Xhorhouse, where they attempted to rest and collect their thoughts, not reunited with Yasha, everyone drinking some tea and hanging out under the massive tree that is on top of their house. And here is where we finally got more or less an origin story to Caduceus Clay, or at least his family. He explained this story in a very fairy tale-esque way, which was a joy to hear, especially from Caduceus. He essentially explained that there's 3 families, the Clays, the Stones, and the Dusts, and they all have sanctuaries that they guard over. The Dusts are the ones who watch over the kiln, which is where the party is decidedly heading. In the evening, Jester also sent a message to Dairon at the request of Bo. Although Bo was very apprehensive about it in the first place, she's worried about Dairon being angry, upset with her, disappointed in her. She's worried that Dairon knows what the party has done and is furious and maybe wants to kill her or exile her from the Cobalt Soul. All of these thoughts are going through Bo's head, but she doesn't really express it. But the message was sent, and Dairon did seem annoyed and intense in the words she was saying. And once again, we were left on a cliffhanger as Dairon arrived in the late hours of the evening to the Xhorhouse. She quickly asked Jester where Bo was and said that they desperately need to talk. Now, what this conversation is going to entail, I'm scared to even theorize. It can't really be anything good. Dairon is probably stressed out because of all of the small victories the Empire has been having. And she probably had found out that the dynasty has acquired one of the beacons. And she may have found out that it was the party that gave it to her. But we're gonna have to wait till next week to find more answers. And with all of that being said, we are going to wrap up. Let me know all of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions during this episode. A lot happened, there was a lot of role-playing and a lot of new information, new story threads, new possibilities. I'm sure I've missed some, so please discuss down below. As always, I hope you all have an absolutely fantastic rest of your weekend, and I will see you all next week.